Hi everyone, and welcome to today's talk. I am joined today on the program with Andrei Martyanov, an author and military analyst. And I'm very happy to see you again.
My privilege. Thank you, Glenn.
Uh, well, there's been some huge developments lately, one can say, on the front lines, but also in the diplomacy. Not that there's been made that great advancement in the diplomacy, but at least there has been some movements, one can say. Um it is a bit unclear what's happening in Istanbul, and furthermore, we now see that J.D. Vance stating that the negotiations appear to have reached a dead end, and he also took the opportunity to say this is not our war, so signaling he's part of the America First. And Trump just got off his 2 hour phone call with Putin. What do you make of all these developments?
Nothing changed. It's Mr. Trump has been explained the overall framework. Mr. Putin came out after that and in 3 minutes explained everything, which was the key thing. Of course, Russians will have a blister soon on their tongues, repeating this thing over and over again. Until root causes are eliminated, there will be no ceasefire, no stopping of the hostilities. And so, yeah, that's what Mr. Putin stated to Mr. Zarubin and the press corps in Sochi. I just got off listening to it second time. And yeah, so he's tired. He's tired explaining to Donald J. Trump that he is a party to war. United States is co-belligerent. United States is the source of the special military operation. Donald J. Trump, because of his basically features of his character, narcissism being one of the main of them, he cannot just leave it like this because he's self-proclaimed peacemaker and what have you. But yeah, J.D. Vance is actually correct. It's a dead end. It's all about the forms and protocols and dancing around, while in reality, just this morning, the military administration of Sumy region, which is Ukrainian, declared forceful evacuation of the 202 settlements there. So, and this is just, you have to say though, I read the Express, British thing, just Brits are excellent military people. I'm being facetious, of course. They said that Putin is being kept oblivious to Russia lost already 1 million people and Russia is losing badly. So, okay, that's the world Mr. Trump lives in, but this is not the main point. That's what many people do not understand. The main event is not this phone call. We know what is this phone call about. We know how Trump tries to save his, he doesn't have any reputation other than being hot air balloon, but it was statement by Mr. Peskov this morning that there is no work on arranging any meeting between Trump and Putin, and there is no meeting planned. That's the main thing. This is in diplomatic language is go and pound sand. That's what it is. And until Donald Trump will ask, for example, Sebastian Gorka, who stated 2 days ago that the meeting is imminent, how the hell those people are in his administration still. All those military amateurs such as Kellogg and all those pseudo, generals and what have you, he surrounded himself with these people. With the exception of the, people of the scale of Tulsi Gabbard and Kash Patel, who are obviously primarily the internal sort of thing, for the United States. His foreign policy team, with the exception of Mr. Witkov, who is correctly stated as a teddy bear, he's a nice guy. He's just plain and simple nice guy. That it's a disaster. The guy repeats his first term. He is surrounded by neocons. He is being ordered by them. He has no clue about military. He has no clue about operations. And as a result, it is him who is kept oblivious. And again, when you have people like Kellogg, who won't be allowed to command a battalion in the Russian army, what do you expect? And we are seeing this. And Mr. Putin today, again, for 2 hours, explained to him, we either make the arrangements on the larger scale, which are modus vivendi between the United States and Russia, and Ukraine is not even the number one thing on this agenda. And but for Donald J. Trump, it is always important to present himself as he was doing this for 15 years on the show Apprentice. The guy in control, you know, the guy who runs and orders people around. While in reality, he represents the belligerent side. He represents the enemy of Russia and Russian people. And Russians have been repeating this non-stop. And the same what Putin just repeated literally 40 minutes ago. He came out and said, well, not quite like that, of course, but he said, remove root causes, then we'll talk.
What do you see this? I agree, though. It's surrounding himself with the neocons. He had many points during the election campaign identified this as the key flaw of his first administration, and he does appear to repeat this. So I don't know. I hear a different interpretation of this, though. This Kellogg versus Witkoff. Why are they doing the diplomacy parallel? Because they are so different. They're taking very different views. Again, Witkoff seems to some extent recognize where the Russian red lines go, while Kellogg is seemingly replaying World War II, where he's going to divide into spheres of influence. Also, he seems to be setting up the whole diplomacy for failure and pulling the United States deeper into the war. But is this a good cop, bad cop tactic, or is it just Trump lost control of his administration? And I guess more importantly, do you know how the Russian leadership is interpreting any of this?
Russian leadership, the same as most Russian people who are in one way or another engaged in the military political analysis, they know who Trump is. Listen, we know. There are excellent FSB and SVR psychologists who work for Russian government. They know who Mr. Trump is. Yeah, he tries to play bad cop, good cop, but this is because he is ignorant. And that's the point. Kellogg is ignorant. He's militarily incompetent. There are no American generals who are militarily competent. They lost all their wars. They don't know how to fight real war. And the fact that they don't even know the real history. The history of the World War II for the United States Army was written by people like Halder, Hauser, and of this nature, Manstein. So what do you expect? They live in this fairy tale world. They do not understand what modern operations are. They don't. I mean, I don't know what they teach them in their, general staff and command colleges. Same goes for Europe. They literally are clueless. And as the result, you have this situation. And yes, Trump lost again the control of his administration in the foreign policy field, and he never was good at it. Anybody who believes that he wrote his book, The Art of a Deal, which was written by somebody, written by some, I have news for you. His verbiage, I am not native speaker. I speak better English than he does. At least I know more adjectives which are synonyms to the word beautiful, or wonderful. I can kind of expand a little bit on that, So there you go. And you have the guy who is narcissist, with at this stage of his life, he's becoming old. He's, 78 years old now, or something like that. Yeah, it begins to affect your character. And this feature, it's not a bug, it's feature. It comes at the forefront. And that is why he's inconsistent. He's, for all intents and purposes, is schizophrenic. The guy came out, what he did, many people do not understand. He literally, 2 weeks ago, he came out and insulted 27 million Soviet people who died, destroying the European Nazi crusade against Slavic people, essentially. He doesn't understand what he's doing. He thinks that because he can produce those, grandiose statements, which he always did, and that he knows how to, basically defraud real estate market in New York. It makes him great statesman. He's not. His first term was a catastrophe. It was on his first term. He stated himself, I'm quoting, Oh, I started to deliver, javelins and things of this nature to Ukraine. Well, it was on his term, first term, when Ukraine de facto became almost full member of NATO, with the exception of the Article 5. Period. That's what he did. And now we have the guy who actually, if he feels that he's losing, in his moments of lucid thoughts, he has this idea that, yeah, he keeps, he has all cards on his hand. Well, he had, what, 4 months now to stop the war. He didn't. So there you go. Everything is, judged by the actions. And that, yeah, it's just pathetic, honestly, to observe this. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, no, well, yeah, don't really agree with JD Vance's statement that this is not our war. I do think that
Well,
obviously
uh,
since pushing for a NATO expansion, at least since 2004,
yeah.
toppling the government, this CIA partnership with the intelligence services starting the day after the coup. I mean, the US has been very involved in this war
Oh,
ever
absolutely.
since it broke out in 2014. So to just say now, well, it's not ours, it's not really credible. But that being said, his Witkoff's argument that the negotiations might have reached a dead end, that sadly seems to be the case. But was there ever any hope there? Because the
No,
sides appear to
no,
be too far apart, no?
it's not about him being too far apart. I mean, as I already stated, Russians have blisters, me included, soon on our tongues. I mean, for Russian people and like, and ethnically and culturally, that. And Putin, Lavrov, Medvedev, Patrushev, it just list goes on and on and on. All objectives of the special military operation, which primarily political objectives are demilitarization and denazification of whatever will be left of Ukraine, will be achieved. Simple as that. And it was Mr. Putin, actually, and Medvedev himself, who stated in no uncertain terms that, yeah, the removing of this neo-Nazi regime from Ukraine will be one of the part of the denazification. It's just the matter of evolving of the objectives, especially after Boris Johnson, on behalf of Biden administration, sabotaged Istanbul talks in April 2022, that it became the demilitarization of NATO, because NATO became the full-blown participant of this whole ordeal, and Russians now demilitarizing NATO, and it's going really well, actually. And so, what can I say? I mean, Joe in line, 1954, diplomacy is the continuation of the war by different means, so simple as that. And only battlefield, only real economy, only real industries decide the issue, period. Always was like this, still is, and will remain so. And anybody who thinks like Trump he's very verbose, despite the fact that he's a very limited, vernacular, but he's very verbose. He constantly puts out those statements from his whatever the truth or whatever freedom network. I mean, really, the president of the United States, the president of superpower, he should have been behaving himself at least accordingly. So, but no, we have this whole show. It's a show, but without any substance. It is completely hollow, and as the result, Vladimir Putin already told him today what was needed to be told, and as a result, we also have Mr. Peskov, who actually Putin yesterday before the talk already stated this. He repeated, and this will be repeated again and again. Root causes. You don't address those root causes, Ukraine will cease to exist. Simple as that. Russians are not in rush. They are in a very good position, and so they can take it as long as they need.
If the Americans, though, were able, you think, to pressure the Ukrainians by withdrawing weapon support, logistics, intelligence, and pressuring the Ukrainians to effectively say, well, you have to restore your neutrality, and accept the loss of territory. And with the collapse of the front lines, the Ukrainians would feel compelled, and well, the Europeans, well, they might not need their consent. What do you see the possibility of where Russia might be willing to make a compromise? Because I often make the point that that Moscow could show some leniency in terms of where the administrative borders of the new four regions are drawn, given they don't control all the territories, but also uh, on the issue, for example, neutrality, it's either yes or no. So this is obviously written in stone. But for example, with the demilitarization of Ukraine, you can always argue to what extent there seems to be some room for negotiation there. What do you see the Russians being willing to give if they would get this deal of neutrality and accepting that these territories are now Russian?
Um, I do not believe that anyone in Russia Security Council believes for a second that you can make a deal with the combined West, United States included. I am on the record for the last, well, second decade now, that United States is non-agreement capable country. That means whatever you sign, the same goes for Europe. Remember, Mr. Holland, Frau Merkel, it's lie. It's always been lie. And so Russians are not idiots, and they learned their lesson, which, by the way, is the proof is in the pudding. Russians are done with Europe, for example. They turned away and going to the east and very successfully at that. Now, the question is that whatever you sign with the combined West is not worth the paper which it is signed on. Look at the INF Treaty. Look at the ABM Treaty. It doesn't matter. I mean, and so in this case, the arrangement is being done as we speak in a classic Al Capone manner, which is, of course, with the good word and the gun, you can get much further with the kind word. The gun, you can get much further than with the kind word alone. So the idea behind this, and this is not a secret really, is complete demilitarization of the NATO and eventual collapse, de facto collapse of the NATO, where Russia will be building bilateral relations. Not with some EU, not with some NATO, but NATO have to cease to exist. Now, this is how it, well, if it moves back to original borders, it's fine too with the Russians, but the point is, considering the fact that what Europe is looking at in terms of its economic decline due to the lack of resources, and especially energy resources, Russians are not idiots. They know how to calculate and how to count. And so as a result, United States has to get the hell out of Europe, which is already happening in a sense, especially now they're discussing of removing all troops by 2028, not because of the goodwill, not because of the good nature of the United States, but because in lack of capability of keeping them there. And once this type of the arrangements is put in place, then Russians say, yeah, let's sign something, and then it will be signed. And after that, any kind of the trespassing of those red lines will elicit the appropriate response, including let's keep in mind, I repeat this ad nauseam. Combined West lost the arms race. And it lost not just in some field, it lost it overall, wholesale. And we are looking at what I repeat again, which is the part of the strategy of Russians now, especially when you look at the development of and dynamics of the military industrial complex, for example, is to keep combined West behind Russia 1 or 2 generations in terms of development of the new weapon systems and methods of the combat. Many people do not understand, which have been stated from the get-go, not only by me, but my friends who are senior officers, colonels, and from the serious organization, when they stated the special military operation is not just about basically removing Ukraine and its Nazi regime and defeating West. It is about building what General Staff and General Gerasimov, chief of the general staff, are doing. They are shaping Russian armed forces to be the best armed forces beyond 2050, and they are achieving it actually beautifully. So it's the deterrent factor in the conventional field, which begins to play the role. It's how to put it like this. Russians do not want to do it. They are not going to do it, but they have this gun, which is, of course, which we know. There are 700,000 Russian troops in reserve now, right now. What is 700,000 troops in reserve? It's essentially two army groups, three actually. So can they go to the border of Poland if need be? Absolutely. Can they wipe out any kind of their military facilities in Finland, which is the new NATO member, if, God forbids, NATO decides to commit suicide? Absolutely. That is why Leningrad military district has been reinstalled. And so when you look at this, this is your Al Capone principle, kind word and the gun. You know what? And you can get much further with that. Absolutely. So because Russians learned their lesson since 1990s. Russians were treated as the second-rate people, as subhumans, and they have been always treated with contempt. And any kind of Russian, issue, Russians were raising any kind of issue regarding their security arrangements, it was treated like, oh yeah, they are losers. So, and the more Russians were willing to go for the compromise, it was viewed as the weakness. And here we are today.
Yeah, and I remember George Kennan, he wrote and said a lot about the in the 90s, the dangers of
I guess
treating
his memoirs,
Russia,
wonderful memoirs, yeah.
treating Russia with too much contempt, that this would fuel resentment and conflict in the future. But given that, to quote France, the negotiations start moving forward. In the absence of it, if there's no capitulation either, where will Russia stop in terms of territory? Do you think, again, it's limited how far the Russians want to go, but do you see them going further west than Kherson?
Yeah, possible.
So,
It's definitely one of the contingency planning. And that is why U.S. Army and armed forces actually are trembling with the fear, because already being humiliated with all this operational planning, which was, I mean, that was unbelievable in military terms. The chief of NORAD, what his name, the Loet or whatever, I don't remember, a week ago, he comes out and says, if Russians continue to move forward, it will necessitate, well, it can bring the involvement of the, U.S. Army and NATO. With what? How is he going to even fight that? But still, that tells you those people they're not good military people, honestly. They are primarily the policy, conduits, and that's the only thing they do. And Russians don't care. United States has no resources to fight real war, and neither does Europe, especially Europe. Europe is just absolutely paper tiger.
but moving from the diplomacy or failure of diplomacy to the actual battlefield, there seems to be some huge movements lately, then especially south of Konstantinovka, and some huge breakthrough. The Ukrainians don't seem to be able to stabilize the front lines, and the Russians seem to have entered more or less a very wide operational space where they can either cut west and form some salient around Pokrovsk. They can go west and encircle a huge territory, just go further north. And again, there's a lot of for the Ukrainian side disasters possibly playing out. So, and of course, this is just that direction. You see pressure now mounting on all across the front line, which is maybe why the Europeans now suddenly, after being very dismissive even of ceasefire, now asking for 30-day, explicit unconditional ceasefire, without discussing any political settlement. But where do you see the battlefield going now? Because again, you don't have the battle plan of the Russian army, but you're a military analyst. You read the maps. What do you think is happening?
No, Pokrovsk will be, which is happening right now. There are two, it's a joint operational axis, Konstantinovka and Pokrovsk. So Russians found the gap there, which was expected. And now the Pokrovsk is being surrounded from the north, which is natural. It will be called around. Russians are not going Pokrovsk in full force. They will squeeze it, they will allow it to just stay there, until the situation is absolutely intolerable. And then they will leave the tactical opening on the western side. They will allow whatever units and formations are left there to try to escape. While they will be escaping, they will be killed. But in general, if you look at the front, it's a classic split. They put their whatever is left of armed forces of Ukraine in the split, which is impossible to maintain. And yeah, it's a classic exhaustion strategy. And Russians are not in rush. They do not want to. Listen, the question here is correctly, which is brought up by me and by other very many serious military people, my colleagues and friends, actually. What are we going to do, they ask, with the 200,000 Ukrainian POWs? Who needs them? Can Russia go this big aero offensive? Yeah. Russians have been able to do it since 2023. They didn't do it on purpose at all. They want this slow grinding, slaughter, essentially. And the question, can Russia break through, for example, around Pokrovsk and go towards Slaviansk, Kramatorsk in one major offensive? Yes. Why? To what? Get yourself, 150, 200,000 POWs? What are you going to do with them? That's the problem. And so in this case, I know it sounds cynical, but this is how it works now. And it will continue to work like this until suddenly West decides to do some stupid thing. And then in this case, Russians will jump immediately to the full occupation of the left bank of Dnieper. But of course, this will increase Russian casualties, because whenever you do the offensive operations of this scale, you do lose more people. But I want to quote my good friend Vladimir Trukhan, Colonel Vladimir Trukhan. He stated on the first days of the special military operations, that Vladimir Putin told Minister of Defense and Chief of General Staff, literally, you are free in terms of time. He uses this term, Russian army was untied from the calendar. Do as long as necessary. And there you go.
Well, it's of course not just in the Donetsk region. You also see in Sumy, Kharkov. You see also in Kherson. There seems to be
Dnipropetrovsk. Russians will be in Dnipropetrovsk Oblast shortly, especially once they surround the Pokrovsk.
So the conquests are extending then beyond this four original.
Already beyond, it's already beyond. Look at Sumy. Again, today, just recently, before we went on online here with you, military administration of Sumy region, Ukrainian. 202 hamlets, cities, and villages are to be forcefully evacuated. Of course, because Russians are going there.
And so these new conquests, are they intended, do you think, to be included into the Russian Federation as a bit of a buffer, or will it be negotiation, the chips, I guess, to get the rest of the four original region Russia annexed?
Russians do not want to govern Ukraine, but there is how to say it, it's necessary to create a buffer zone. How it will be created, that's the whole other story. So, and it's not conquest. Russians are not in. If Russia would have been at the conquest of the territory, things of this nature, we would have a completely different picture today. No, Russia doesn't want to govern those people. So, have you heard recently, in the last 8 months at least, when Vladimir Putin stated anything about brotherly people? I haven't heard it anymore. He simply doesn't use this anymore. They are not brotherly people. You have the new political nation, which is built on a complete hatred of Russia, and majority of population, how large, I don't know, but majority, they abhor Russians. They cannot stand Russians. So, and why would you need to take this population on your balance and feed it and, maintain this all necessary social services? No, essentially, and again, I understand there will be some sensitive people who will say, oh gosh, what he's talking about, what is he talking about? Well, this Margin-top plan, Ukrainian industry is basically destroyed by this stage, with the exception of the some energy sector to provide the minimum required, amount of energy to maintain some kind of the livelihood. It's going to be agricultural country, agrarian country, if you want to call it Morgenthau plan, but that's it. Russia never again will repeat this idiotic mistake, especially which came with the Mr. Khrushchev, who started to move and develop Ukraine, his former, fiefdom, so to speak, as the first secretary of the Communist Party of Ukraine, while in reality he is ethnically Russian from Ural region. He was always partial. First, because he basically sunk, drowned that republic in blood, up to the point, the Stalin telling him, he called him fool. And guess what? Soviet Union, Russian Federation, especially, just to give you example, famous Antonov Bureau, okay? Famous Antonov cargo planes. It was Novosibirsk Bureau, albeit it started to be transferred there even during Stalin times. But you would see so many plant and institutes, all kinds of things moved from Russia to Ukraine during the Khrushchev times, especially. Then don't forget who Brezhnev was. And it was called the, Dnipropetrovsk Mafia for a reason. Well, Russian ethnically, this was Ukrainian people, essentially, from Ukraine. And that's not going to happen anymore.
Yeah, my my last question was more about the tactics on the battlefield, because the drones have really limited the ability of making huge advancements forward, or do you see this only being along the current front lines? As well, I kind of went with the assumption that neither side would be able to move too fast forward, but I guess my mind has been changing a bit over the past few days when you see this town after town falling. So to what extent do you see the battlefield having been changed, though, by the new technologies introduced on the battlefield?
I can tell you one thing: drones among them is not the biggest change. It's for the, there's a lot of course gamers and all kinds of people like, oh God, look at drones. First, Russians already introduced the anti-drone technologies, which are, you have drones which fight drones. So inevitably, as it was expected, because what is a drone? It's another iteration of the air power. In this case, it's a tactical level. And so it became just another air-to-air battle between drones and counter-drones. So it's not the main force responsible for the overwhelming majority of the casualties was, is, and will remain artillery, including what is called multiple launch rocket systems. These are which are responsible for 80+% of the casualties. And in terms of the armor forces, they're not going anywhere. They continue to fight. It's just that in this particular case, the realities of the especially strong points in the way the defensive lines are configured there. First, Ukrainians don't have any more tanks. Like, I mean, they have some. So there is no like tank on tank battles that much anymore. They still have Bradleys, and they still have today, I believe, just today, latest data, 2 Leopards have been burned by Russians and the number of Bradleys. But that's about it. It's nowhere near as it was in 2022, 2023. So while drones are really effective, and impressive pictures, reality on the ground is simple. You need infantry, you need artillery and rocket systems, and you need of course what is called RUK, recon strike and recon fire complexes, which are of course based or grounded in the top-notch advanced systems of the reconnaissance, including the technical reconnaissance, ranging from the top, from the space down to the earth. And we are looking at, it's the warfare of the 21st century. It is heavily net-centric, and Russians are just basically, honing it. And so the only drones they have really, yes, it sounds horrible, but look at this. You have a drone. Okay, how many people can you kill with a drone? Most of the time, it's almost individual, unless, of course, you get into the dugout. Then you theoretically can blow some, 2, 3 people who are hiding there, primarily on the Ukrainian side. You have to obviously, hide yourself under all kinds of the, means, but the warfare essentially remains as the industrial warfare with the means of the fire impact, which are not drones. Drones are just one part of it, and by far not the largest. And so we have this, and when the white paper will be coming out, they're beginning to be slowly kind of compiled by Russian Defense Ministry. Obviously, not all of them. We will not know the real statistics and data sets, many of them classified for a reason, not to give NATO any kind of ideas. But we know that air defense rules in the end, and air defense rules the battlefield. And this was demonstrated, and because of that, the rest of it continues to be as it was: standard, massive firepower and very high precision, very accurate firepower and long-range fires, which rule the battlefield.
Well, Andrei Martyanov, thank you as always for your insights. It's very depressing to see this war still going on, but yeah, no, it's hopefully there will be some more changes though. So thanks again.
My pleasure, Glenn.